sure I get this all working here. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, you guys let me know if you can hear me all right. This is definitely one that I have a lot to say, so I want to make sure we get through as much as we can. So we'll probably get started pretty shortly. But as I like to start these, if you want to put where you're watching from, and how's your Wednesday going? I mean, it's been, 3 weeks since my last stream? We were gone, and then we had to help a new roommate move in, and now we're back, and I have a Kickstarter launching on Monday. But I figured I would do a stream today, not so much on just watching me draw, but on basically my notes on Kickstarter, what it means to create one, why we create one, how you can create a better one, and how you can make more money, and hopefully more net profit to put in your own pocket so that you can get back to drawing. So that is what we're going to be discussing today, but we're going to wait a couple minutes as people are joining in here. I do not have Josh with me. He is upstairs doing the orders, and he will join me on Monday. We're doing a stream when we actually launch the Kickstarter. So if you want to come to that, we're going to get some champagne, and hopefully it'll be a fun one. Hi, everyone. And if you could, please put @Vonart before your comment or question. That way I can see it as I'm going in between my notes, all this stuff on my table, and the comment section over here. I might move it just a little over, though. There we go. Oh, yeah, you're hearing me all right? Okay, good. Oh, hello, Lane. How are you doing? Good to hear from you. Jonathan, how's it going? Scotland finally has some warmth. We had 4 seasons in a day last week, sunbathing in snow within a few hours. Oh, that's crazy. I feel like I've only experienced that a couple times in my life. Hello, everyone. Zakor from Mexico. Hello, hello. Fem, hello. A Wednesday where I get home in time for this is a good Wednesday. Yeah, I know you just ran in Kickstarter, Jonathan, so hopefully this will help you with your next one. And hopefully I can give you some tips and learn from failures that I've had on my past ones, because there's a lot, and I want to share that with you guys so you don't, make the same mistakes, and I can kind of push you further ahead so that you're not struggling or stumbling on things that shouldn't have to be struggled with. Hello, hello. Hey, Corey. Corey's one of our wonderful mods. We can keep this conversation going on the Discord. There's a link below, or there should be if I did my job correctly on this YouTube video. And you can join that, and there will always be announcements for when we're going live, and if we're talking specifically on stream, or if we're doing a follow-along. And also, that's where all my Patreon backers get to see all my work-in-progress drawings, especially for my tarot cards. Hello, hello. Miri from New York can finally attend a full live stream today. Well, welcome. I'm glad you were able to make it. Hello. Leticia from Brazil. Hello. Hicks Yang from Hong Kong again. Well, hello, hello. Fem from Belgium, doing amazing actually over here. Really enjoying my new job working on a 3D animation movie and very excited to be here. Well, I'm very excited that you got your job and you're enjoying it. I think you're a hard worker, and from what I can tell from the streams, you're a very, very lovely person to be around, so I'm glad you're enjoying it. Sil says, in the Netherlands, we experienced similar weather this week. We'd have a sunny day, and then it just starts snowing. Yeah, it's been weird in Wisconsin, too. It's been, like last week was really nice and warm, and then this week's more temperamental, we'll say. Well, hopefully it'll get warmer. Okay, are you guys ready for this? Whew. I was up really late last night. I took notes because I didn't want to just wing it. I feel like there's a lot to talk about having a successful Kickstarter or how to run one. And then as I was writing it, I think I also have to talk about my past Kickstarters, what didn't work, and to share with you why I don't think they worked, and then things that did work and things that I would encourage you guys to do. And then we're also going to go over, I know money and numbers aren't really the most fun topics for artists, but I think they're good to understand and at least acknowledge for yourself, especially if you are a freelancer or an independent artist, because knowing your numbers allows you to do what you love more often, which hopefully is art, and then that way you don't have to worry so much about the business side of things. Because I feel like I'm finally at a point in my life where the money has been not only consistent, but good enough where I can pay for myself, my cousin who does all the packing and printing, and then Josh, my boyfriend, who does a lot of the managing, the emails, and the like buying inventory. So as long as I can make that per month, I'm a pretty happy camper. I mean, I'm pretty typical Midwestern person. I don't need to be a billionaire. I'm very happy and comfortable, but I really want to be drawing more than anything. I don't want to get bogged down with the fear of, can I pay for my, like when my heater went out last year and it was like a $6,000 fee. Like that is stressful, and I want to be able to make enough money where I can cover that kind of stuff so that I can, do art and not have to have like high stress levels every day of worrying about money and kind of letting it control my life, which it did for a long while. So I'm hopefully here with a lot of these live stream things too to kind of help you guys out if you feel you're in a similar situation and to kind of push you in a more comfortable direction. So that is what this stream is going to be about. So if you have any comments or questions during this, feel free to ask them. I might be on a rant on something that I've taken notes on, but I promise I am going to be looking at the chat here, and I want this to be a conversation, not just a lecture. So we're going to keep it in that format. Okay, so starting off officially, hi everyone, I'm Timothy Von Rueden, better known as Von Art Online, and I do these streams typically most Wednesdays. And today we're going to be talking about creating a successful Kickstarter as an artist. Now, I've done 4 in the past, and I'm going to be doing my 5th one starting on Monday. And for each one, I've kind of collected data over the years, and I've definitely taken a hindsight look at what worked and what didn't work, and I want to share that with you guys today. But before I get into the details of each of my past ones and what I felt either worked or didn't work, I want to first talk to you guys about, especially those who are seriously considering doing a Kickstarter. I think we need to first talk about, okay, what are you making? And usually in the art world, this will consist of some kind of a merch or some kind of a product. That could be a book, it could be a pin. I've seen people do t-shirts, beanies, you name it. The products could be endless depending on what you're looking into. But I would say the most popular one specifically on Kickstarter would be art books and enamel pins. And then from there it gets into like comics, and you have the ones that kind of trail off into other merch. And then cards. Obviously I did a card deck, tarot decks. That's what I'm currently working on. So the first thing you need to look at is, okay, let's say, for example, you're going to be doing a book. Okay. If you're going to be doing a book, regardless of how great and wondrous you think this book is, you need to do research on other books that are similar to the one you're making so that you can kind of get knowledge on, okay, this is how they laid out their Kickstarter. This is how their campaign is broken up into sections. These are the tiers that they chose. Oh, they're selling their book for $35. Are they including shipping in that amount? These are good questions to have, and you should be asking a lot of them. And if you are lucky enough, like I feel like I have been over the years, you'll have a group of other artists that you can go to and ask these questions. And usually a lot of those art friends have also ran Kickstarters, so you can ask them what worked and what didn't work. And I think over the years, there's been a lot of good debates that have happened. I mean, one of the big ones are stretch goals worth it? And that is one that is a very, it's a very gray section. So I think the discussion alone has a lot of people on one side either for it or the other side that thinks it's a waste of money. And I will discuss both when we get to that section and what my thoughts are on it. So definitely you want to do a lot of research. And even with my tarot cards, or with my books that I've been making, the last one, I did a lot of research on other artists that I admire and respect and what did they do on their Kickstarter. And one example, which I'll talk about a little later too, but was from Iris Campier. I hope I'm saying that right, but I love her work. And she had a fairy book that I backed, and she did something really smart. For marketing on Instagram, she released a new original on her Kickstarter every day. And that way she was able to market her Kickstarter every day without it feeling spammy or without it being bogged down with like the same image of the book. And I thought that was brilliant. So I adopted that for my third book, but I'll talk about why it didn't work that well for me on my third book. I mean, it did work, but it didn't. And then in my card deck Kickstarter, when I launched that last year, I changed it up and that worked perfectly. And I'll explain why it didn't really work as much in the third book, but why it worked with my card deck. So, but we'll get into that in a second. And I know it's going to be a lot of talking here. So if you don't feel like you guys have to stay quiet, like you can keep the chat going, you can keep the comments. I know sometimes when I do these lecture chats, it's usually like really quiet until the very end, and then it's like an avalanche of comments that come in. So don't worry, I can definitely take the questions during this as I'm talking, and I'll just do them as I go. Okay, so with any product, I wrote down to also do research on the actual product. So we're going to talk about this with knowing your numbers, but making a book is probably one of the more frustrating challenges as being an artist, because you have to basically shop for a book manufacturer and what will give you the best price without losing quality. And I will tell you right now, this is not fun. I have never talked to an artist that truly enjoyed their process, unless if they worked with 3D Total or Flesk Publishing. Then I feel like it's a little less hands-on, so you're able to enjoy the process more. But if you're literally doing this independently, like I have been with my previous books and my card deck, you do kind of have to do a lot of research, and you kind of have to shop for a book manufacturer, which can be really frustrating. And then samples and a lot of these things are very expensive. But we'll get into that when I talk about the books. So the next one is knowing your audience. And this could potentially be a whole nother live stream that I could talk about this. But essentially, is this a product that, even if you're really excited about, does it fit the brand that you're already selling, the narrative that you're pushing through your social media? Because you don't want to, like, let's say if I out of the blue released like a dog backpack that was bright and colorful, it doesn't really fit with what I've done before. So I think there would be a lot of brand confusion. And I know it's kind of gross when we talk about ourselves and what we do as like a brand, but I think it's good to at least acknowledge consistency really is key to building a market for yourself that people feel encouraged to want to buy whatever you're making or creating. And that's why when I do my books, my card deck, they all have a very similar theme, a tie-in of grayscale with like gold accents. And that's something that I try to push with everything I do now, because I realize that that's kind of the category that people put me as an artist in their minds. And I'm totally comfortable in that pond because that's where I enjoy being. And I like having that kind of be my staple as who I am. So when you're making a product, make sure that it makes sense with what you are doing already. The next one, yes, if you are doing anything on Kickstarter, I would not recommend throwing the Kickstarter before you're done with the product. I would literally have the product like 90% done, if not finished already, and then launch the Kickstarter. I've known people on both sides of this, and I'm sure you guys have seen ones like Ross Tran where they did their Kickstarter before they finished, and then it got extended by a certain amount of months. Or I shouldn't really name names, but I have seen ones that have not been successful, and some of my close friends where they're like 2.5 years behind on their Kickstarter obligation, and that is a scary place to be in because you have a lot of people dropping out. I think you lose a lot of trust between yourself and your audience, which is a big no-no when it comes to your business side of art. And obviously, the more that I talk about this, I don't want you guys to think that I only think about the business side of art, because honestly, I don't. I really enjoy drawing and doing that side way more, but I think of the business side as like a game. I'm very competitive, or I was, not so much anymore, but I think of this whole business side as just a game. And it's something for me to stay afloat. And that's why I'm going to talk a lot of what is probably considered like gross in the art world, but I think it's good, to understand these things, because then you can get, like I'm going to keep repeating, you can get back to what you love doing. Okay, so if that is the what you're doing, then when should you do your Kickstarter? So I wrote down that you should plan ahead, and I mean really ahead. So for my 4th book that I'm launching on Monday, I knew I was going to make this book like a year ago or like a few years ago, because I release a book every 2 years and I'm consistent with that. And I think even with like launching a product every 2 years, not only are you building consistency, but you're building a pattern for your followers to kind of understand that, okay, this is usually when he releases a thing. He does a book that consists of 2 years, and it's something that they can look forward to, and something that they can almost plan on if they really like your work, they'll want to collect anything you do. So it's not really a surprise. And that is why, obviously, I knew I would be doing a book every other year since the first one. And my grand plan was every 2 years I'd make a book, and then in 10 years I'd make like a mega book. And that's actually coming up in 2 years. I have to start planning this mega book, which will have 10 years worth of my work. So I think it's good to plan way ahead. And I don't know why in my 23-year-old brain, I was really focused on the long term. And maybe that was just how I was raised, but my parents like instilled the fear of money in me, and you should never be broke. And they're like, my poor dad, I love him, but he was so afraid of money that I think he instilled the fear under me. I'm stepping on coals sometimes thinking about money. And I think that's why I plan so far ahead. And I want to tell that to you guys, that this has worked so well for me, that this is something that you guys should plan as well. Like, plan for the long term, not for like short-term gains. The next one is, okay, so let's say you already have the project in your head and you know, okay, I'm going to make a book and it'll probably be about a year or two till I finish it. When it's about 3 months before launching when your Kickstarter is coming up in your head, you're thinking, okay, maybe spring, maybe early summer. I would say 3 months before the actual launch is when you should announce it officially. I think this gives you enough time to prepare for it. And also, you're not having what I would consider the Final Fantasy syndrome, where you announce a game and then it doesn't come out till 10 years later. I think that kind of destroys the hype for it. And then the expectation for it becomes so, unlimited that it'll never meet the expectation, because there's 10 years worth of expectation built into it. I think whenever I talk with my friend Sean Price, he always talks about how Nintendo does it best, because they'll announce something 3 to 6 months before they launch it. So it's like it's like the sweet amount of time for you to get excited about it, and then maybe you forget about it a little bit, but then as the time nears up, the excitement builds, and then when it launches, like, you're in it, and they're usually really good at that. I know they get me with a lot of video games. I'm going to be getting the new Pokemon Snap in 2 weeks, and they announced it, in December? So, like, that's literally their marketing schedule, and I think it works so well. I'm seeing some comments here. Let's see here. Oh, yes, please don't forget to tag Vonart. That way I can answer your question. Everyone's scribbling notes and just absorbing the information first. Let's see here. Oh, hey, Felix. How are you doing? Any advice for getting started selling and advertising in general? Oh, boy. This would definitely be a longer conversation, and I might do a separate live stream just for this, but I guess my shorthand answer would be focus on creating the best work possible first and foremost. Because I think it's really easy to market like excellent work and work that clearly like is a step above the rest than it is, selling subpar work. And it's not even the artist's fault half the time. I feel really bad for like a 19, 20-year-old artist who feels they have to compete with all these mega artists on Instagram that have 1 million plus followers, because how can you not compare and contrast? And it's really easy to get down on yourself nowadays. So I would say, don't worry too much about the marketing and advertising and selling your stuff, more so than creating really good work first, and work that you're proud of. Don't feel like you're just selling and catering to the market and what's popular. So I would say that'd be my first piece of advice. But then once you're ready to step into that field, I think my personal favorite has been grassroots marketing. So literally going to conventions, having person-to-person interactions. I go to a lot of workshops, and half the time I'm not even an instructor. I like just going to meet new artists, and I'll always bring a couple of my books along. And what's funny is usually whenever I bring my books just to kind of show people what I do, I don't end up with them by the time I go home. People usually will buy them from me. So I actually make some money while I go to these workshops, even though they're kind of intended as like my walking portfolio. It's just something that I've noticed over the years is I like building connections in person rather than just strictly online. You obviously can build an online following, but I don't know if I'm just old school with that. I really enjoy person to person. And once COVID is finally out of here, I think we can start focusing on getting back to conventions and then getting a booth there, or even walking around the convention with your portfolio. I've met a few artists that way where they literally come to my table and I think their work's awesome, and I'll literally follow them on the spot because I think their work is inspiring. So that would be my advice for that. Andrea says, have you ever had Kickstarters that haven't gotten funded? I have not, knock on wood. That is something that I was really nervous about with my first one. And I'll talk about that when I show my previous 4. And I'll talk about why my first one specifically was kind of a hodgepodge mess. I'm surprised it worked looking back. But I'll explain why I don't think it was that great, but why I just barely managed to be successful on that Kickstarter campaign. Jamie says, oh no, I got that one, sorry. Anthony says, I totally relate to what you said about making quality work. I've been so focused on spewing out artwork and it made the quality suffer. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those believers in quality over quantity, but I know that's not really the way algorithm favors artists nowadays. It's definitely a focus on quantity. So my advice to artists in 2021 would be to post a lot of in-progress pictures of like a bigger illustration, and still more than anything focus on quality, because that's what will make you stand out. I mean, I see so many artists when I go to their page where it's just like a female bust profile, and it's kind of stylized. It seems reminiscent of Loesch, but not quite as good, and that's all they do. And I just feel like they're going to get lost in the crowd of other artists that are kind of doing the same thing. So I think a lot of being true to yourself, and I know this sounds so corny, but it really is true in the long run, where that's what will make you stand out. And even if you don't have 1 million followers, you might have, let's say, 20,000 followers where, actually, you know what? This leads into my next point, where to really make money and be stable as an artist, you need 1,000 true followers. You don't need 1 million, you don't need 2 million, you just need 1,000. Because if every time you launch a product, or if you make prints or pins, if you have about 1,000 that will most likely support you with any product that you make, or if they're supporting on you on Patreon, or if they're watching your YouTube videos with the AdSense revenue, you will be fine making money that way. And I think there's so much of a focus on mass quantity of followers, but what I've learned over the years in talking with other artists that are established and have not even a fraction of the following I do, but they make more money than I do, is because they have more true followers than I do. So that's, I guess, a message maybe for you guys too, is don't focus on the quantity of your follower count, focus on the quality of your follower count as well. So it's not just the quality of your artwork, but the quality of the people following you too. And I just watched this documentary called Fake Famous on HBO, and I didn't realize you can buy followers, and you can, I think they said you can buy 10,000 bot followers, so they're not even real, for $117. But the problem is that these aren't real people. They're not going to be buying your products. So yeah, it might look like you have 20,000 followers on Instagram, but how many of those did you just buy? And it became really gross. And I think it's a good documentary to watch. And half the time I was like, what? I didn't realize some people, there's like places in California in America where it's like half of an airplane on the inside and it's just stationed in a warehouse. But people go there to take pictures as if they're on a first flight class, and they'll make it look like they're flying to Dubai or to Europe somewhere fancy. And it's all staged. It's all fake. It's mind-blowing to me. There's a lot of artificial, I don't want to say artwork, but there's definitely a lot of artificialness. I know it's not a real word, but you know what I mean, in the social media arena. And I think kind of staying true to yourself and in what you're posting will also help you stand out. But that's a whole nother thing. I could talk about that for a while because I think that's ridiculous. Felix says, what do you think is a reasonable relationship between the size of your audience and what price you can go for? Or is it simply, I want to make X hourly rate and spend this much time? Felix, this is such an excellent question because I have struggled with this most of my career because I'm from Wisconsin. So Midwestern people tend to undersell and undervalue their worth, and we'll usually do a job for like bare minimum because we're just happy to be included. And I'm going to talk about that with my first Kickstarter because my first book Kickstarter was only $20, not including shipping. So I actually lost some money on this Kickstarter in the end, but I'll talk about that at that point. But in the video, I had to explain why I'm justifying charging a book for $20. You should never have to justify why your product or why your thing is a certain amount of money. And especially if it's already on the low end of pricing, I felt so, I don't want to say insecure, but I didn't feel like people valued pencil work at that time. So my way of making it feel like it's worth your money purchasing was to explain, this is how much the books cost, this is how much shipping will cost, how much the pins that I had exclusive to that Kickstarter will cost. And that's how I reasoned out the price of things. Nowadays, it's way different. Now I'm like, you know what? Each print I'm going to sell for $50, and eventually when I make my tarot deck, it's going to be very expensive, and I don't want to drop the price now because I'm not for sure set on it, but I can tell you it'll be more than $200. And I think it's because I realized I'm not pushing for quantity anymore. I'm pushing for quality, and when someone gets something from me, I want it to be really nice and have a lot of care and effort that went into it, so that when someone purchases it, they feel like it's justified. And it's something that I'm always struggling with. I feel like I've gotten better with it recently because now that money has been flowing in pretty steadily, I feel more comfortable raising the prices so that we're not, killing ourselves in our work basement, golding, hundreds of prints on the monthly basis, because we might have less people buying it when we do a price increase, but the amount of money we're making is about the same, if not actually better, because you don't have to worry about quantity of people buying anymore. And this goes back into the quality of your work, the quality of the people buying it. And honestly, I think people do appreciate quality. And I'm going to be really transparent with you guys right now. The art world in general is very much all a perception. How we value art in general, I mean, look at the whole NFT market right now. Even though I'm not really a part of it and I don't want to be a part of it, you see how people are dropping crazy amount of money on pieces that most people would, I would assume, don't think it's that great. But they're dropping that money because they see value in it at this current time. So I think my advice to you, if you undersell yourself as an artist, is to start with not doing bare minimum. Don't sell yourself short for the lowest possible quantity. But you also have to be self-aware enough to realize, is my work worth this amount of money? Or if you're doing freelance, is my time worth $60 an hour if I'm still not really understanding anatomy that well? I think there is some self-observation that you have to go through. But that is something that I know every artist goes through that. And they have to go through a self-worth evaluation. Because I think a lot of us get into art because we're the shy, awkward, weird kids, or we have this fascination with the natural world or whatever it may be, and maybe we were so quiet because we didn't get along with people, or maybe it wasn't that we got along with people, but we were just the outcast, or we were really into Halloween and weird things like I was, so you didn't have a lot of people to talk art to. So I think inherently you acquire this sense of worth that tends to be lower, and you feel like you're lower on the totem pole. But I'm telling you right now, start in the middle and then work your way up. Or if you're really brave, start more near the top, but don't be delusional. I think there's definitely something said there as well. Let's see here. Jonathan says, speaking in person to people, utilizing your environment is key. Take pride in your product and just say to folk, have you ever heard of Kickstarter? I'm currently ... Customers at my work loved it. Oh my gosh. When I first did my Kickstarter in 2013 for my first book, my dad called me and he was like, do you need money? Is everything all right? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you're asking for handouts on the internet. I'm like, no, Dad, that's Kickstarter. So thankfully, I feel like Kickstarter is well known enough now where you don't have to explain crowdfunding websites. But yeah, back in the day, it did kind of have this weird reputation. I hope none of you guys had to experience that because, yeah, I've a little bit felt like handouts at the time. And it was such an awkward conversation with my dad of no, I'm not struggling with money. This is a product that I'm trying to make. It's basically a pre-order, and that's how people essentially see it. But we'll get into that when I get to that part. Okay, moving on. We're still in the when should you launch your Kickstarter. It has been kind of this rumor that I've heard over the years of you should avoid the winter months. So December and January specifically, I would not launch your Kickstarter. And this has been basically said because a lot of people during Christmas time are more fixated on spending money on their loved ones, getting presents, and then usually after Christmas they're more broke. So that's why January isn't the best. I've always heard spring and summer were the best to do it. The spring specifically because usually people in America are getting their tax returns and it's warming up. People are getting their money again. They're ready to spend possibly on something, and that is why I switched my Kickstarter launches from February to April, May. And it has worked. The jump from February to April, May has worked very well for me. Now, I've seen campaigns where it did work in December. Alan Williams, my art hero, launched one last year in December, which I thought was surprising because I'm like, wait, I thought December was like the no-no month, but he still did well. I think, your online reputation can carry you through even a weird month. And then I have a friend of mine right now, her name's Devin, and she's doing a book on Kickstarter, and it is doing fantastic. It's through 3D Total, and I think she's just under 180,000. And she has a lot of good advice for people, so I would definitely follow her. She's definitely one of those people that are very on top of the business side of art, and I learn from her every time I talk with her. I talk to her about once a month, and she always comes at me with these really good tips. And actually, one of them that she told me on our last talk was on TikTok. Apparently, the algorithm favors when you use not like 20 hashtags like Instagram does. Instead, they want you to use like 1 or 2 so that they can fit you in a category more easily and that they can share you to people who also want to look at that category. So now on TikTok, I only use like hashtag art and hashtag artist because it'll put me in that art category. And I have seen a jump on my TikTok. And it was like one of those things where I'm like, how did you find this out, Devin? But I think she's just a wonderful person. I've met her a few times and we had a good talk at Gen Con. She's just a really genuine person. So I would go follow her. Where was I? So I have a tendency to tangent on these discussions, so forgive me in advance if I do more of that. So the next thing I wrote was to push the final month. So when you do your 3-month, you announce it. These 2 months you can kind of like here and there talk about it, maybe make a story about it, but then once that final month comes up, I should see on your page a post being like, hey, 1 month till this launches. And then in between the 1 month and the day it launches, I should see way more marketing, like the build up towards it. And more than anything, the final week. I think you should be doing a post every day before the launch of your Kickstarter. And it shouldn't just be spam, so don't just push the book image, or if you're doing a card deck, don't just show the card deck every day for 7 days. I think trying to figure out a clever way of marketing it. I've tried different things in the past. Some things work, some things don't. But something I've learned is to just create or to post art, especially if you're doing a book, post some of your best images leading up to the book that are included in the book. That way you can kind of market the book, but you're also doing a throwback and people will appreciate that rather than just spamming, basically advertising every day. And try to avoid big fonts or images with a lot of font on it. That's usually not something that is well liked or well received on social media. So I keep it pretty simple with an image and then have a lot of the information in the text itself. Except for the day it launches, I usually will put the text of like, Kickstarter is live. And I think you see a lot of artists do that nowadays. So that's the way I would launch it. Okay, now I have just recently, well, not recent, like last year, discovered the power of promoting and marketing and like paid marketing. And this is another thing that gets into what could be considered like slimy territory. But I think if you do it earnestly, I don't see that much of a problem with it. The last year when I did my card Kickstarter, I remember throwing about $500 throughout the campaign. It was like $200 at the beginning, and then actually maybe it was closer to $1,000, and it was like $100 for each of my original posts. And it definitely got more results, more hits because of the paid marketing. And this is where I think capitalism gets kind of gross, or can be taken advantage of, which can be gross, because it's the whole pay to win, mentality, which I still believe in like creating work that is quality and has craft and has passion behind it. And then if someone wants to promote it in that way, but it's a contradiction in some way. And I think it kind of goes from person to person how much you are willing and accepting this way of marketing your work. But definitely through the coronavirus and figuring out how can I stay afloat without cons, because that was a big stress for me. I did use a lot more of the marketing tools that Etsy had available to me and Instagram had available, and it really helped push my sales, and it helped me stay afloat. So I'm very thankful for those as well. Now, this is another one of those transparent things that I'm going to be honest with you guys. With this new Kickstarter, I'm probably going to set aside about $5,000 just for marketing. And that is something that, to me, like a year and a half, 2 years ago, was unheard of. I would never spend that much money on marketing. But now that I'm starting to understand that marketing basically allows more people to view your product, and maybe there's people that really love pencil work with gaudy gold accents that have never heard of me, and basically these advertisements are putting me somewhere where they can see it, because there's so many people posting online. I mean, if you're talking about saturated markets, social media is the most saturated market ever in existence, just ever. And for you to be seen, it's really difficult, especially nowadays where every day more people are joining social media and they're younger. You see all these Gen Z kids, and hell, even some Gen Alphas that are like getting into it. My niece is on TikTok and she's 7 or 8 years old, and she's getting likes from people, and I'm like telling my sister, I'm like, I don't think she should be on TikTok. Like, I think, like, if there's some kind of a security setting, you should definitely be looking into that, Katie. But that goes to the point that it's just so saturated. So that is something that I will do. I've been saving up the past like 6 months, and I will be putting about $200 a day probably throughout the campaign. And this is something where if you have the money to do so, obviously I would recommend it, but this is not necessary. I think as I'm talking, I'm in definitely a different place than I was 4 years ago, where 4 years ago I spent about $150 on marketing. Obviously way different times, different mentalities. But that's just something I've learned over the years. So if you have the money to do so, it kind of goes along with the way of thinking of spend a nickel, make a dime. I've kind of used that mentality since I was about 22, 23. And then once I started doing cons full time, me and my really good friend, Puiche, we started doing cons at the same time, and we knew each other from school, so we really bonded over doing conventions. And my first convention I made $800 at, and I thought, I'm rich. I can retire early. This is the bee's knees. I have it made. And then obviously once I started to know numbers, I only actually made about $220 from that con after, the cost of the booth, the cost of travel, cost of supplies, cost of inventory. Once you start to take everything into account, your net profit won't be as pretty. But I did learn a lot about how spending a nickel to make a dime is so true, especially in the art world. If you spend money on a really nice printer, it'll be a high upfront cost, but then over time, that printer can make prints that will make you money to not only make up for the cost of the printer, but actually make you real profit at a certain point forward. Same with making pins, and I'll talk about that too at some point, where, you can buy 100 pins, and let's say it's $400, $500. It's kind of a big upfront cost, especially if you're just out of school or if you're struggling, like you're barely breaking even every month on the job you're already having, or you already have. $500 is a lot of money. And I think saving up for that and then spending it, I'm kind of teaching our new roommate, Deandra Pop. She's wanting to get into the art world. So I'm talking to her about how when you sell an original, do not use that original money to buy food or you should buy food, but she can do that with her normal paycheck. But the money that you make from art, reinvest into the business. Don't buy things you don't need. That is like one of my biggest pieces of advice. And I'm kind of tangenting at this point too. I'll get back on track in a second. But don't buy things you don't need. And don't think, okay, I can justify buying a $10 Starbucks drink today because I sold an original. Just don't have that mentality. Take all of the earnings you make from selling that original and then reinvest it back into the business. She and I are that was a weird way to word that. Her and I are finishing an original tonight, and I'm gonna sell it probably on my website. And the money that we split and then I give to her, I'm asking her to put all that money towards a pin design and to not use it for something frivolous. And because when you put the money back into the business, you'll see it snowball over time. And I'm one of those people. I'm a long-term planner, and I'm hoping to instill some of that in you guys today, or if you're watching this in the future, because I think that's really how you can be successful in the long run, is to always think more minimal. I haven't bought new clothes in a long time. I keep things very simple. Even though money is doing pretty well right now, I'm not just splurging it on things I don't really need. I do have some tendencies to do some bad spending. It's usually art books. I bought like 3 last week because I thought they were so inspiring, but I try to keep it down. But anyways, let me answer some comments here before I get too off on track, and then I'll get back on track here. Fem says, I love it when I find artists that not only have amazing artwork, but also show themselves in it and make you feel like you are allowed to know the artist behind the work and have a connection. Totally agree. And I think those are the ones that are usually the most authentic. And authenticity is not something you can buy. It's not something that you can necessarily sell to people. But I think if you try to be authentic in your work and how you present yourself, people will read that. And that's why I like in-person marketing more than online. Because I think if someone meets me, I mean, I would hope they have a good response. I try to be, kind to everyone. I'm never dismissing anyone. I mean, even if it's like a kid that wants to show me his artwork for like a half hour, 45 minutes at a con, yeah, it can get a little long, and sometimes you're just nodding and like, oh, that looks great. Because, there's like customers behind them and you kind of feel bad. So you have to be like, oh, can I just take this customer for a second and then I'll get back to your portfolio. But you should actually, that is another piece of advice for all of you guys, is never be unkind to people, especially in person. If you're going through your Instagram DMs and you're getting some negative comments because you posted a saucy story about a political thing or something, well, one, I would just recommend don't do any of that. Like, just avoid negative opinions online in general. But if you're dealing with bad DMs, do not respond with more negativity. Literally one of the worst things you can do, because not only are you wrapped in it mentally, but now that person is projecting this horrible image of who you are behind the screen. So I would just avoid it altogether. And then when you're at a convention, or if you do in-person marketing, you better put on the best version of yourself and be kind to everyone. Do not dismiss anyone. I don't care how old they are, how young they are, what they look like. I've had a 12-year-old buy $140 worth at my booth. It was completely unexpected, but it just goes to show you can't just dismiss someone because you think, oh, well, they're just a kid. They don't have money. They're looking for stickers or pins or whatever that they can afford. No, this kid dropped money at my booth. And it was very surprising, but it just goes to show you can't judge a book by its cover in that case. Anyways, let's see here. Anthony says, I think you've spoken about this, but it really is so important to figure out what type of art style you want your name to be identified with. And I feel like a lot of beginner artists try to focus more on what's popular rather than what connects with them on a personal level. This is the most true thing about the art world, that people can say it all the time, like, be true to yourself, do work that you enjoy. But it's so hard not to be influenced by what you see being recognized and what's getting popular online. I feel like it taps into some human basic instinct of, oh, well, if that does well, I'm going to do the same thing so I receive the same amount of praise and that same amount of glory. But I really don't think it works in the long run. Although there have been like a few artists that have gotten through, I'm not going to name names, but they definitely seem like they just really respond to an artist's work and they kind of recreate it and like slightly make it different, but I can always tell it's slightly worse. And they do get popular. But when I look at their work, it never feels genuine. It never feels like it came from them as a person. It always felt like a copycat that just got stuck doing that style, and now they're just kind of in it because it's been received well over the years. But I try not to question what other artists do at this point in my life. I mean, I'm 31. I try to just focus on myself and give back in a way that is hopefully positive and helpful to younger artists. I'm not going to judge them if they're looking at an artist and kind of just copying their style. I can suggest to them, like, hey, be sure that you're drawing what you want to draw, but more often than not, they're going to do, what they think and what they perceive to be successful or what they think they want to do. But I totally agree with you on that. I wish more artists would feel comfortable being authentic with whatever style or medium or whatever it is that they want to do, regardless of how hard it is, how time consuming it is. And I think about my interaction with Alan Williams when I first met him, what was it at this point, 8 years ago? And he was the only pencil artist booth I've ever seen. It was like my mind was blown. And I talk about this on a few of my other streams, but to sum it up, it really inspired me to have my own pencil booth because I always enjoyed working with pencil more than I did any other medium or even digital. I love digital, but I could always tell pencil, it was just a notch above. And once I saw his booth, I was like, I can do this. I don't have any more fear of thinking I have to do color, I have to do digital, because that's the way the movement's moving. And what was funny is the first convention where I had a mostly pencil booth instead of what before was mostly digital. I had digital pins that were fan art. I had a lot of digital prints that were either fan art or from my swordplay book, but they were all color. And then I switched over and I did pretty much all pencil, and I made about double what I normally did. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I had this huge fear that I wouldn't be successful doing what I enjoyed doing more because I don't see it in the market. But because I was the only pencil booth, especially the first like 4 years of doing cons, or 3 years, I was the only pencil booth at every con I went to. So by standing out, you actually, it's not a bad thing. And especially in the art world, standing out's a great thing. Unless if it's like so weird that people are like, But I mean, hopefully I'm not that weird in terms of my content that I create, and it worked. So I hope that you guys can also hear like being true to yourself can also make you more money. And there's a lot of fear of like, oh, if I'm too unique or too niche of taste or level or whatever it is, I'm telling you that sometimes that can be the best decision for you to go that direction and go 100% in that direction. But anyways, Jonathan Liddell says, that final week countdown was such a useful tip from your last one. Works so well. People don't always see it, so it keeps engagement questions coming in. Exactly. And he says, if you shout into an empty room, no one's going to hear it. Pay to have your message to get the right people can only be a good thing. Yeah, I think I've kind of learned how marketing and paid marketing can be very beneficial to artists. I don't think just relying on that and like to sell content that is like half-baked or things that you're not proud of, that's where I think I wouldn't do it. But I totally agree. That's how I see it as well. Okay, I'll do 2 more questions and I'll continue on here. Anthony says, I'm reminded of something a professor told me once. As long as you're really good at something, someone will pay you to do it. Yep. This is actually in a YouTube video. You know what? I'll share it. I'll share it on the Discord. It's like 8 tips from successful artists, and it's a really good video. I watch it like once every few months. It has one of my favorite artists, Marina Abramovic. She's a performing artist, but that was one of the tips, is if you get really good at anything, someone will pay you for it, and it's very true. Jonathan Liddell says, my buddy Matt may run a Kickstarter to support an art fair in Sussex. What would you suggest is the most important aspect in this case? Wondering where he should focus his attention, i.e. good video. To support an art fair in Sussex. See, this is a little different for me because I'm so used to marketing products and like an actual physical merch that someone could purchase. I don't actually have the best advice on like location events or experiences because I've never done one and I don't know anyone that has done one. I would say definitely for an experience purchase, marketing is going to be key. You want to have your experience be something that people want to not miss out on. So I definitely think taking like the best video, the best photos that you can, and really sell it that way. I wish I had more advice on you on event Kickstarters, but I would feel weird giving you advice on something I don't feel fully knowledgeable about. But that would be my intuition first thought, was definitely the presentation of it is going to be the main focus. Okay, so moving on. Where did I leave off here? Oh, for the last week, the final few days, please have your friends and people you trust to proofread your Kickstarter campaign. This is something that I have noticed in 2 of my past ones. I'm not going to say what they were, but I will say there were 2 spelling errors on 2 of them, and I was incredibly embarrassed because the tiers, specifically on Kickstarter, once you lock those in, once you launch your Kickstarter, you cannot change the text in those tiers. And I was heartbroken because on one of them, I'm not going to say which one, I launched it and I noticed there was a spelling error. And I even wrote Kickstarter. I was like, please, it's just one letter I need to switch around. And they wouldn't do it. You're not allowed to change the tiers once you launch it. So please get it proofread. Okay, let's get into my past Kickstarters here. So I'm going to move myself over here. Hello, Double Tim. I'm going to move away this. Apparently I wrote know your numbers before the stream started. Forgot about that, but it's true. Knowing your numbers is very helpful. I'm going to bring over, here we go. Okay, so let's talk about some of the past Kickstarters I've done and my advice to you on what I thought worked, what definitely did not work, and things that I've learned since then which move forward. So, as you can see here, I've done 4 Kickstarters. Each one has gotten higher funding each time, and there's a lot of factors into why I believe that is, and I'll kind of explain each and how I got to this way of thinking. But first, let's go through each. So my first one, my first little sketchbook, this guy, this one was done in, let's see, what did I write down? February of 2015. Now, at this time, Kickstarter was not generally new. I think I have a graph here. As you can see, let me zoom in. So Kickstarter was founded in 2009, but it wasn't until like 2012 that it really started to pick up. And I launched mine in 2015. So in most people's minds, 2015. So in most people's minds, it wasn't that it was like a new thing per se, but it was definitely something that I still had to explain to people what it was, because a lot of the mass amount of people that I knew, like my parents, my friends, they didn't really know what Kickstarter was. So it was a lot of explaining what a crowdsourcing website even was. And during this time in my life, I was probably in the worst state of my entire life that I'll hopefully ever be in. I was going through a horrible, it wasn't even necessarily a breakup, but it was a really bad time in my life where I felt very alone. And I made this book as a way to distract myself from feeling so lonely. And that's why it feels very hodgepodgey. I look at this and I kind of cringe because all the things that I've learned about what makes a successful Kickstarter weren't really done here. And even in the video, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to fully play it, but at one point I justify why the book's only $20. And that is something you should never do. Never justify why you're making a $20 book for someone to buy. But I wrote down what I thought worked and what didn't. So in this one, I asked for $1,800 and I made $3,100. And I think overall, this is a horrible Kickstarter page, especially by today's terms. The visuals are hard to see. They're not readable. It's too wordy. There's not enough info on the actual book itself. It's more about text and me like selling the book up, even though I don't have like images that would really sell it for me. You can see them, but they're so small. No one can even see what will be in the book. Who would buy a book that they don't know what's going to be held within? So to me, this was a big learning experience. Clearly, I was a newbie. I didn't have a lot of other examples of Kickstarters that I could look to at that time. There were maybe like a handful, but they were all very simple back then too. So I learned a lot by doing this first Kickstarter. And the other thing that I wrote down that were, I wrote horrid packaging. I included, or let me break this down. So when I made this book, I thought it would just be the book. But then I decided to include stretch goals because everyone was doing stretch goals at the time. It was like the hot thing. So I included an 8.5 by 11 print with the book. The problem is the print didn't fit the packaging that I bought for the book. And at that time, I was poor, to say the least. And I couldn't change the packaging. So the prints on most of these Kickstarter books just got horribly damaged. And I had to apologize to every single one because at the time I couldn't afford new packaging. Like that's how tight things were. And It was very embarrassing for me. So when I went into my second book, I made this promise that I would never have to deal with that again. But I'm going to show you what missteps happened and why that was also kind of a stumbling error for me. So moving on from that one, which I did learn a lot though, so I don't want to just throw it out the window, but I only had a couple tiers. There were stretch goals, but I kind of regret adding them. So let's go into the second book. So book 2, like I said, I release a new book every 2 years. So if my first one was in 2015, this one was in 2017. So this is in February. Once again, still kind of a winter month. But this one, I went balls to the wall. I really wanted this one to be my best Kickstarter ever. So even with the video, I actually wrote a piano song, and during this, I actually edited this entire video. So every image I had to bring into a video editing software and time it with the second beat of the piano notes, and it was a little extra. I think it's kind of cute, and I'm glad that I really put in the time and effort because I was so embarrassed by my first one. But with this one, I was definitely way more smart on how to market it. In the video, I show way more of the actual drawings. I do close-ups. I do stills or quick time lapses of me actually drawing. I think that's a big plus nowadays. You want to actually show yourself working on the product. And as you can see with the story, despite the swordplay part, which I wish I didn't include, the rest of it was much better. The images were easier to see. I still think I should have added more than just this, but it showed more of what would be inside of the book. Now, this I also made $30, so I did a $10 increase, and I didn't explain the price of the book in this one, thank God. Oop. I forgot that my phone still rings through my computer sometimes. So we're going to ignore that for now. I'll call him back later. So what was my biggest mistake with this one? I offered 9 different prints that people could pick with their Kickstarter pledge. Don't do this. This is the worst idea. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea at the time. This is a horrible idea because every single Kickstarter backer, I had to look individually up which one they chose. And you can imagine that this led into people getting the wrong prints because when I did my Kickstarter line, I had 4 people helping me. I had my closest friends at the time. I had them help me pack this, and I bought them lunch. And yeah, there were a lot of packages that got the wrong prints, and we had a lot of return, or I had to ship new ones with just the print. And you know how I said with my first book that the print didn't fit the box? Well, when I ordered my book 2, I had a box. I didn't bring this one with me in the back, but the box, it fit the book comfortably, but the problem is the actual box itself was 8.5 by 11. Well, if you have an 8.5 by 11 print, guess what's not going to fit in an 8.5 by 11 box? Because I didn't consider the inside dimensions. So that was painful because I had to actually ship a lot of these prints separately from the book, even though I made a box specifically for this book. So that'd be my next piece of advice is if you are making a product, know what you're going to be packing it in and be sure to include extra space, especially if you are doing prints or if you're doing pins, whatever it may be, add extra space so that you can make room for it. Okay, and that's what I kind of learned from my second one. I also did visual reward tiers. This is a big thing I would definitely recommend, especially if you're an artist or a visual medium. This shows people what they'll be getting included with the tier that they're picking. It's a very simple thing to do. It will take probably a day just to make it so nice and clean. You want to do a good job on it. I also wrote down that I added originals. So this was the first time that I added originals for sale. But I think I marketed this horribly, and that's why, even though it only says 1 was sold, it was actually 3. I think 3 were sold in the end. And I didn't do a good job marketing those. So I learned a lot from that as well. I think that's mostly it with this one. And I also wrote down that I did way more research and I had a passion for the actual design of the page. So you can see, separators in text, so it defines what the section is inside the book. These are the prints that are available, the reward tiers. I think this is good because a lot of people, when they go to Kickstarter, they just scroll. And basically they're looking for images to sell themselves, purchasing and backing your product. So that's what I learned from my second one. Now, when I went to my third one, there was a huge jump in sales. So this one raised about $11,000. The next one, my third sketchbook, which won't load. But while this one's loading, this one raised $42,000, and I did way more research. And I mentioned earlier, but one of the big things I did with this one was I did an original every day, and that worked very well for me. The problem with the original thing that I tried to do is I overdid it, where instead of having a new one every day, I did 2 new ones, sometimes 3 every single day. And that marketing got so cluttered, it was hard to really focus on one of the images when I'm doing 2 every day. So this was kind of a mess, and it took me forever because a lot of these are not a font. I had to handwrite all of this, and that took forever. So I would not recommending handwriting your font. If you do, I would make your own font, or I would buy a font online, and that's how I would use that consistency throughout it. But I wrote down that I had changed it from $30 to $40, and that worked really well. And once again, don't focus so much on quantity, focus on quality. It was minimal text. It was very visual heavy. So the parts where you see the actual text are very small. They're like a sentence or two in between large spans of just blown up images. Because I've learned specifically with art and in the art world, you really want to sell the work first and foremost. If people are loving what you do, the work that is included in whatever product you're making, they'll buy the product. But if you're not showing a lot of, the drawings or the illustrations that are going to be in the book, a lot of people get a little nervous buying a book where they're like, well, maybe I like 10 of the images, but what if those are the only 10 I like? So I try to just shove a lot of like, oh, maybe you like this. But I'm not throwing so much that you're like, I'm overwhelmed. I try to throw enough where you kind of get a good sense of what's going to be in the book, like the majority of the book, without it being overwhelming. And now this is the time where I actually did do a new box that was bigger. And this is actually for my 4th book, so this is my 4th book box. But I try to have a custom box, and these I've learned a lot about. And you know what, I'll talk about that later, but like the price per box is very important to know, or the price of a tube or the shipping mailer, whatever it is you're going to be shipping things in. You have to take that into account while you're making, these big purchases. When you purchase 2,000 books, it could be like 13 grand. So you want to be aware of where your money is going. But anyways, I'll talk about that after this. I did stretch goals again, and this was the last time I did a stretch goal. I think I have a personal opinion about stretch goals where I don't think they actually add a lot to the actual Kickstarter. And usually, this is personal preference, but I feel like a lot of the times artists will give things that you don't really want. It'll be like small prints or a bookmark. There are people that do really enjoy the small stuff, and I'm not knocking on them. But for me personally, I just see it as more like waste. It's just more landfill stuff that if people want to buy your book, I don't think they need 3 bookmarks, a set of 5 mini prints, 4 pins, and a sticker sheet. That could just be me, but I've had a lot of conversations with people about stretch goals. I don't really think that more people buy your product because there's a stretch goal in it. This is something that is up to debate, and like I said, this is more personal preference, but I actually don't think stretch goals are necessary for you. So I didn't do it with my last one, and I made more money, and I was able to make more net money, or instead of gross. Or no, I made both more gross and more net money, profit, I should say, because I wasn't spending a lot on the back end on things that weren't necessary for the end product. And then once again, visual reward tiers. I think this is a big yes. And the originals, I'll talk about why, how I made it better with my next one. So after that one, I changed my focus into doing a card deck. Now this is like 4 months after COVID hit. I kind of knew I wanted to make a card deck at some point, and then this basically just like streamlined it. So that's all I worked on for 4 months essentially. Like I did a couple drawings here and there, but it was really focused on this because I needed to make enough money to support me and Josh and my cousin Jake. So I went really hard on this Kickstarter. I was hoping I would make about 20 grand because that's what I needed to stay afloat for like 6 to 8 months. That's what I was kind of planning in my head of like, okay, I need this project to do well so that I can support myself, my house, my utilities. And I did a lot of research on this one. And I think that's why the return on this, I thought I was going to make about 15 to 20,000. I ended up making 53,000. That's the most I've ever made. And I remember being like, off a card deck? Like this was my my big thing. This is what was going to make me the most money. And what I realized is I think a lot of it had to do with the way I marketed it, the way that I did the Kickstarter specifically. And this is probably the most proud I am of a Kickstarter because I did it in about a couple weeks before I actually launched it because I was in such a rush because I needed things done, but I didn't want to skimp on quality. So there was a lot of late nights here. But as you can see, the things that I wrote down that I thought were good, one, it was a $20 product. So I went kind of back to my original price range, but I think it was because I looked at other card decks on the market, and each of them were between about $12 to $40. And then I realized, okay, if I'm going to make a card deck for Kickstarter, I'll make it $20, but then when I have it on my store after, it'll be $30. And that was like my way of selling it to myself. And I think that was a smart move. So I think when you do a Kickstarter, having the product be cheaper and then after you launch it, be more expensive is kind of an incentive for people to get it while it's on Kickstarter. So that was good. And I only did the card tiers. I didn't do any extras on this one. Not only did I not do stretch goals, I didn't do any pins. I didn't do any prints, nothing. It was literally just the card decks and then the original plus a card deck. And that worked brilliant for me. And I think with my fourth sketchbook, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to do 4 tiers, like very simple. And actually my friend Devin that's doing her Kickstarter right now that's doing so well, she has 2 tiers. And it's basically the book signed, the book unsigned. That's it. And a lot of that has to do with Kickstarter added on a add-ons feature. So after you click your actual product or the tier that you want, you then are taken to a new page where you can add on like pins, prints, and all that stuff. So Kickstarter made it more streamlined so that you don't have to have like 15 tiers anymore. You can just have a few and then have add-ons to add to the total number. And that number will still add to the total revenue that people can see publicly. So it's not like this hidden profit that no one can see. But with this one, I think this one also did really well because it was a very simple and clean page. Very little text, and the text that I included I felt was necessary, but then it gets right into the art. You know, these are my cards. There's the 12 suits everyone's familiar with. These are the faces of each card. And then here's some close-ups of the card, in its entire design. And then some notes about the gold, and then how I'm packaging it, how I'm trying to be more eco-friendly, and then basically gets right into the reward tiers. I've learned that sometimes simple Kickstarters can work really well if it's just visually complex enough. Like you add enough visuals that are intriguing, it grabbed the person, they understand what it is, and then they'll buy it. And that's how I kind of treated this Kickstarter. I also wrote that I used the same font throughout. I actually bought a font this time, and it was like a fun card suity looking font, and I decided to use that everywhere and kept it the same color, and I think that really worked well for me. And even this like cursive was actually a sub font of the one I bought, so it has that similar style. And then lastly, I just wrote the visuals were easy to understand. You wouldn't be confused by what you're getting. And going back to why the originals worked on this one but not on my third one as much, it's because on my third one I had 2 or 3 originals that would go out every day, so it was very confusing. With this one, I had a new original go out once every 3 days, and I went in order. So it would be Jack of Hearts, Queen of Hearts, King of Hearts, and then Jack of Clubs, Queen of Clubs, King of Clubs. And people knew what they were going to get on that day, how much it would be. I kept the price consistent. And I kept them actually a little cheaper than I probably should have because these all sold out like right away. But I'm kind of learning, maybe I should have made it a little more expensive because the demand was clearly there and I wasn't responding to it. This is another one of those instances of maybe selling myself a bit short, and I don't want you guys to do that. And they actually all sold out. Even though I forgot to add the banner here, they actually did all sell out. So that was a good learning experience for me. I do think having originals with whatever product you're pushing is great. If you're a digital artist, I would find some way, maybe the original underlying sketch if you start traditional, whatever it may be. I think it's a good way to market your Kickstarter throughout the campaign. So those are my Kickstarters leading up to the one that I'm going to launch on Monday. And the only other thing I'm going to show you before I get back to the comments here and answer some of your questions was I actually keep track of everything. I'm a very numbers person. I actually like math. Even though I'm an artist, I love math. And I actually kept track of my numbers on social media. So specifically, I looked at Facebook, DeviantArt, Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram. So as you can see, back then, my Instagram, my first Kickstarter, I only had 247 followers. Back then, Facebook and DeviantArt was like my marketing tool. You can see how times they change. They're constantly evolving and they're navigating new paths. So it's up to you as the artist to, see where the trend's going and then try to be ahead of it every time. So in this one, people can say, well, you did way better because you had more of a following. But I think it's because true, very true. But I learned so much from each one. And I've seen people that have less followers than me make way more money than me. So never just assume if someone has a lot of followers that they're going to just make a ton of money. I think a lot of it does come down to also recognizing what works on Kickstarter specifically, and how you market it to people can be a big help. So then as I did each of my Kickstarters, I would write down what my Facebook, DeviantArt, Tumblr, Twitter, Gram, and then eventually I also started writing down my YouTube and my MailChimp mailing list, which I think is a really smart idea for people, especially if you're doing conventions or if you have an online website. Have a mailing list that people can sign up for. Usually about a fourth of the people that sign up for your mailing list want to buy whatever you're selling. They are signing up specifically to be annoyed in their email inbox so that they can see what you're doing and then just purchase it right away. They might not have time to go to Instagram or DeviantArt. They would rather get the notification through their email, click it, and then buy it. And usually it's an older crowd, tends to be an older crowd, like 30 plus of age. I put myself in the older crowd because art is such a 25 and younger game a lot of the times, with being so involved and hyped up on social media. But I've seen a lot of people in their 50s. I mean, Alan Williams is a very established artist, and he's older, but he also does really well on social media and on his Kickstarter. So age is just a number, but I do see the tendencies to be younger for marketing, but that's fine. But as you can see, my Instagram went from 247 to 20,000, and that's about what I made, about 12,000. And then on my second book, my Instagram was just under 200,000. And I remember being a little flustered because there was another artist at the time who had a similar Instagram account, and they made double what I did on their Kickstarter. And that's when I started to realize that I was doing things wrong. And whenever you see someone succeeding in the same field or the same career, do your best never to get bitter. Don't get bitter at someone else for succeeding in an arena that you may not be as proficient in yet. If anything, I always look at it as an opportunity to learn from them and then pick apart, okay, what worked for them that I'm not doing? And if it's something that fits what I'm comfortable doing, whether it's the way they market, whether it's the way they put their images on the actual Kickstarter, whether it's the way of writing that they do, maybe they only had a few tiers, whatever it may be that they do, try to be like an investigator, put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and investigate what worked well for them and why did this work well, and then try to adapt that for yourself. So as I go through, I learn a lot about each and what I think could be done better. Okay, so I'm gonna move this for a second. Let's move back here. Oh my gosh, that's so bright. I'm sorry. Let me pull this back up. Okay, so let me answer a few of your questions, and then we will get into knowing your numbers. This is probably the not the most exciting part about this live stream, but I think this is probably one of the most important things as an artist to know if they're trying to run their own business and brand. So I will get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and add some or answer some questions here. Maybe I need a sip of tea. You know when you talk too fast and you're like, okay, breathe, slow down. That's what I need to do right now. Okay. Well, there's a lot. Jonathan says, in this case, the Kickstarter is as a vehicle for a marketing campaign. You know, that's a great comparison. And I just heard this joke. I think it was Jim Carrey that talked about, whatever the vehicle it is, be a luxury vehicle. And I like that. I think about that of whatever it is you're trying to drive, be the best version of that you can be. Rose Evergreen, hey, how are you doing? Nice to be here again. Nice to have you again. Fem says stream bingo checkbox. I'm sure there's been a lot of checks on our bingo box. Let's see here. Something I've recently discovered from Anthony that helps a lot with self-marketing is living your life in the aesthetic of your work. This way, when people see you, they see your artwork. Yes, this is something that I have not done enough of. I think I've recently started to do it, if you can't tell. But it's something that it is true. The more that you show your face and kind of give a face behind the brand, I'm not one that's very comfortable with this. I grew up feeling like the ugly duckling of my class. So I was never very comfortable with how I looked or my personal aesthetic, but I really liked, creating works that people could. I don't know if that was my way of finding validation at a young age. I do think it is. And that's why I've never really shown my face, or I don't really put who I am at the forefront of my Instagram page. But I do share a lot of life events, but I'm usually not, doing selfie, oh, hey, today I'm doing this. I try to do it more for when I do live streams, because obviously this is very face-to-camera. I shouldn't say face-to-face. So it's been a little more comfortable. But I think the artists that really do well, everyone knows what they look like. When I think of Ross Tran or Loesch or Jazza or a lot of these artists that are very established in their field, I know what they look like. And I think it's because they've done a good job marketing themselves in that way. I mean, I still get messages of people being surprised that I'm not a girl, which I don't really care. It doesn't bother me at all, but it just kind of shows that, yeah, people still don't really know that Timothy is behind Von Art, but that's fine. But I do agree. I think kind of branding yourself, and I will say for conventions, I definitely took that to heart, and really actually did the opposite of what I normally would think of. And my whole booth is white and gold. You won't see a speck of color on it. It is basically all pencil stuff, and I have my prints laid out. Everything's very organized. There's gold. I try to make it feel like an experience at a con, and the older I get, the more ridiculous my booth is going to become. I would love to have an anthropology setup display behind me at some point. I was literally going to spray paint thousands of pencils gold and then hang them in a crescendo behind me at a booth. And then in white, I would spray a bunch of pencils white and then have them spell out my name, Von, behind me. Just a lot of weird, crazy ideas I've had where, who knows, maybe one day I'll actually do it. But I do think putting your work as a style and a brand, and making, I know some people that do style charts for themselves, and they'll talk about what font they have to kind of stick with, what color palettes that are harmonious with each other that they'll kind of use for their brand moving forward. And I do agree. I think that's a very smart move, because then consistency and reliability is something people look for. I don't want to say for in brands, but yeah, kind of. And your artwork, whether you like it or not, will become a brand, and it's kind of up to you if you want to organize it, if you want to keep it more loosey-goosey. Anyways, Alina says, will the card deck be a possible add-on for the fourth Sketchbook Kickstarter? Yes. So with the new Kickstarter, you will be able to have a tier with the deck, just because the illustrations of the card deck will be in the book. So I felt like the tier should include a card deck if you want one. Fem says, I think BackerKit is a very smart way of having those stretch goal items being available to those who want it, but those who don't need it / want it will not get it and have to go through the waste. Exactly. I really wrote that down as one of the last things I want to talk about. BackerKit is one of those websites that is, not relatively new, but new enough where I think artists are now getting a hold of using it for their own Kickstarter campaigns, and it has worked very well for me, and I'll show you the numbers. I like to be transparent with things. I don't feel I have to hide these kind of numbers from you guys. I think it's a learning opportunity. That's how I always saw it from the artists I looked up to when I was younger. And the more transparent they were, the more I learned and was able to adapt for myself. So I try to now do that for others. So yes, backer kit is huge, and I'll talk about that as well. Oh, hey Tijal, how are you doing? Hello, hello. I think Tim would make a beautiful woman. I did dress up in drag. My friend Corinna put me up in drag, and I actually want her to do me and Josh for probably later this year. I want to go to a drag club in like full drag. So I'm one of those people where like I have fun with things. I don't try to take life too seriously. Tijal says, "Oh Tim, you're beautiful. We love you. Also, this Steve Jobs chic look, very nice." I watched the Inventor documentary, and I know this shouldn't be like my inspiration, but it was about the woman who started Theranos, and it was like that blood company that actually failed, but it was a big fake it till you make it misfire. And she talked about how she was so inspired by Steve Jobs only wearing black. That way he didn't have to waste time picking clothes out every day. And I don't know if it like spoke to my soul, but I was like, oh my gosh, I should do that. I should just have one outfit that people they don't like judge me for it because they know, well, he just wears black, it's fine. And I love wearing like a black t-shirt and black pants. So I'm like, I don't have to waste time anymore figuring out what I want to wear every day. It was just like one of those weird efficiency things. And then I saw Queen's Gambit last year, and I was like, oh, it takes like the black t-shirt to the next level, and then it's that black turtleneck. Anyways, this is a whole tangent, but thank you. I like the whole, kind of professional chic, or maybe not even professional, just very like comfortable, but still, I don't want to say fashionable. I don't know if this is necessarily fashionable, but maybe. But anyways, Felix says, I think you can really lean into a Baroque aesthetic with Corinthian columns, floral designs, etc., all in gold. Oh yeah, I think it'll just get more gaudy and ridiculous the more that I spend time on my booth design. So who knows what you'll see in a couple years. Okay, let's move on. And like I said, if you guys have any comments or questions, especially about what I'm talking about, I know there's a lot to digest here. Just feel free to put it in the comment section, but please put @vonart before it so I can see it. So this is probably the most important thing when I talk to artists, and it's knowing your numbers. And literally for our setup in the back room, I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to switch to the small screen again. Okay, so in the back room, we now pre-package all the books, and this is the first time in my life I've ever been like prepared, and me and Jake and Josh have like really been ahead of schedule with like pre-packing things and having prints ready to go and having the shipping be very easy, because now we're getting like 20 plus orders every week that we have to pack and be on top of. And some weeks we might have like 70, or when we do a Patreon pin launch, we had just 166. What was it, last week? I think it was last week that they had to all be packaged individually. They had to be wrapped. They had to put the business card in, taped, get the shipping label printed, put it on there. And the more that you can organize your business from the beginning, it'll be so much better in the long run. And that is something I definitely did not do. So I'm telling you guys, if you want to be more of an independent artist and have a business on your own, try to be organized from the get-go and know your numbers. So what does this tape bar represent on the top here? This basically is something that every artist should do with every product they ever make. And even if it's just in a Google Excel sheet, and actually we did do it in a Google Excel sheet too. I can show you. There we go. So this is our Google Excel sheet. I want to know how much everything costs down to the penny, or if you're not in America, down to the pound, or whatever currency you're using. Because that way I can see how much something costs, and I'll know exactly how much we're spending on everything that we're shipping out. So if I'm buying, let's say, 1,520 books, I think the 20 were just extra, it's going to be $8,636. So each book roughly is $5.60, we'll say 68 cents. Now, this was interesting for me to find out because for the longest time, I thought my book 2 and book 3, I thought they were around $5 each. So when I would sell one at a con for $40, I thought I was making $35 profit. But after we ran the numbers last year, I realized actually each book 3 and book 2 was over $7. And this was crazy to me because I literally was losing $2 mentally in my mind for every book. And then I started to take it a step further because my younger cousin Lane, he's all about like, he listens to Bigger Pockets podcast, and he's really big into real estate. So he's been giving me a lot of advice on running a business, and I love numbers. So to me, this was something easy to implement. But as you can see here, this is where the number 725 came from. And now, mind you, I thought the books were $5. So when I sold them online, and let's say I sold them for $40, but the shipping was like 45. Okay, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, we're making basically like $35 profit, net profit, because our gross was 45 minus the $5 cost of the book and the $5 shipping, like $35. But then I started to really do the numbers because I realized each book when we ship it isn't $7.29, it's actually $9.79 because you have to take into account the tissue that it's wrapped in, the tape. I know how silly that sounds, but you have to take into account every piece of what you're selling. The tape, the box, the peanuts, the cards, and by that I mean like business cards. I have my original business card and a Drawtober one, this one to promote our October challenge. And those are 18 cents each, and those add up. And then more tape on the top and the side of the box, and then the label itself is 21 cents. So yeah, these numbers might not sound as much, but if you add all of the extra stuff together, it's about $2.50. So what I thought was a $5 product that we were selling online actually was $9.79. And this is something that I think if you break it down and do your numbers as well and like break it down into a sheet or however you want to break it down, I think this is something that maybe not is necessity level based, but this has helped me so much in understanding my numbers. And I really like the show The Profit on NBC, and Marcus Lemonis is the guy that like goes to struggling businesses and helps them, but he does it in a very like cordial way. It's not like people yelling like Kitchen Nightmares. It's not is it Gordon Ramsay? I think it is. Or is it Gordon Ramsay? Is that the chef's name? Either way, Marcus Lemonis is more, he's firm with people, but he's kind. And he talks about numbers all the time. And he says if you know your numbers, you'll know your business. So this is why I have it up under the books that we wrap, so that every time I look at it, I remember that's how much it actually costs. So I'm sure in the comments they're like, oh, what is all this? What is all this number stuff? But this, move this over. But this I'm going to break down even further here. What are these? Oh yeah. Okay. So let's do a really quick example. So each card, I'm going to switch this. Let me switch it into because otherwise you're just going to see a bright white screen. So each card deck, right? Each card deck costs about, let me see the exact number, $3.67 to make. So that's great. But then I also wrap it, I package it and all that. It ends up being about $6. Now the tissue that I made, the tissue itself, I wrote down the numbers. Let me see them. Okay. So I ordered 1,000 of these tissue papers from No Issue Tissue. Now these cost, let me see what the actual cost was, 34 cents per sheet. But then I realized, well, we don't need the whole sheet to actually wrap the cards in. It's too big. So then we figured out a way to cut all the sheets into this size, which can wrap the card deck perfectly. Now this size, it changed from, what did I write down here? 38 cents to 9 cents. So that's a huge difference, and that might not seem like a large margin, but when you're wrapping 2,400 cards, yeah, all of a sudden that 20 cents, you times that by 2,400, all of a sudden that's where a lot of money could get lost. So I'm very aware now of when I'm buying something of how much it'll cost. Now, tissue is a really good example. You know what? I will actually pull this in T because I'm going to write the numbers for you guys on here. So the tissue itself, let's break it down. Let me pull this closer. Okay, so tissue costs. So on No Issue, at the time we were buying, if you wanted to buy 500 of these full sheets, it would be 38 cents. And your total would be $190. And a lot of this depends on where you're at financially, if you have enough room to store things. I mean, obviously tissue is pretty easy, but when it comes to books or tubes, yeah, there's a big difference between 1,000 and 2,000 books or tubes that you have to store somewhere in your house. Thankfully, I live in Wisconsin, so I have a pretty big house that's relatively cheap because Wisconsin's pretty cheap. So I do have a good amount of storage in my two basements. But then let's say you want to go up to 1,000. Well, they'll do a bulk sale, or bulk price, I should say, which means your price will go down significantly the more you buy. And this is like key to business because this then would only be $340, which would be if you bought the same amount of tissue at this price, that would be $380. So just because you bought more, you just saved yourself $40. And this stuff can go a long way because last time I looked, on No Issue, if you order 2,000, the price drops down significantly to 19 cents from your 34, which was initially from 38 cents. So then this would be $380. And you're thinking, wait, why didn't it jump up that much? Well, because shipping costs a lot of money, so the actual tissue itself doesn't really increase the price. So this, if you would have bought 2,000 at the 38-cent price, this would actually be $760. So if you can do quick math, which I'm usually pretty good at quick math, this is actually, let's see, $380 that you would save just because you decided to buy it in bulk from the beginning. So this is why having upfront capital that you can work with is important. So if you can save your money early, I always try to put a certain percentage of money towards like spending from every con, from every Etsy sale. I try to put like 2 to 5% in a like a bulk order savings account, and then I also put 2.5 to 5% depending on what it is into investment account like Fidelity, and that way I can make some money from stocks. And even though I don't understand it very well, my dad is pretty good at it, and he kind of helped me set up how to invest in that way. But since I don't really trust the stock market as much as I trust like my own financial savings, I just have a lot of money that filters into different areas. So I'll have like 10% of whatever I make go into a mortgage fund, which only pays for like the rent or utilities and stuff. So I think starting to manage your money that way can be really helpful. But this example is just one. I'm going to talk about the bigger one. And you know what? Before I lay this out, let me see if there's any comments or questions. I'm sure a lot of you are just like, okay, numbers are fun, I guess. Fem says, pictures or it didn't happen. I really want to see that though, or join in. Me as a male, of course. What are you talking about? Oh, me and drag. Yeah, I'll definitely post pictures online. Tishel says, okay, but how about man hours cutting all that tissue in smaller pieces, and by the end you still might end up having a lot left over you can't do anything with because you ordered in bulk. How do you deal with those situations? This is a great question. So I actually pay my cousin Jake. So he does literally all the behind the scene work of, well, not all of it because me and Josh end up doing some of it too, but like cutting the tissue, we cut this in a way so that there's literally no scrap. So we cut it, the big sheet, like this one, we cut it in half, and then we cut that in half, and then we cut that in half. And that's how you get these 1/8 size sheets. So time is something you do have to take into account. So with a lot of things that require manual labor, I hired Jake, my cousin, and that is actually the one thing I should add to my Excel sheet, is because I should technically add how much I'm paying him per hour. I should time him how long each of these different things take, and then that should be also included in the price per product. But a lot of the book wrapping, a lot of the card wrapping, I actually do myself along with Josh. So I don't mind spending time doing these kind of things, but the older I get, the more I realize I'm wasting a lot of time just fulfilling product orders, where I should be spending my time drawing, because that's what I really love doing, and I'm focusing too much on business. So that's why I hired Josh, and that's why I hired Jake. But you are correct. I think you have to take into account time, and that's such a strange factor as yourself, because you do have value, you do have worth, and you have to take your time into account when doing these transactions. So you are right, Tijal. Oh, hey, Amy, how are you doing? Okay, let's talk into the big one, and then I will do kind of an open Q&A, because there was a lot to talk about here. I'm sure a lot of you guys are just tired of listening to me at this point. We're an hour and a half of me just talking almost pure business, so that can be a lot to take in. Okay, so do your numbers. So this is really important, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions of how much people actually make on Kickstarter, and I think it's good to see behind the scenes what's actually happening. So let me share some of that with you guys. So, I also wrote down that I wanted to talk about your goal amount and actual cost of things, but I think your goal amount should be relative to how you should do the math on how much your books will cost, how much shipping will cost, how much everything will cost, and then usually add like 2,000 to that number, and that should be your goal amount for the product that you're making. That way it justifies making the product, and hopefully you order a bulk. Like whenever I do a Kickstarter, I always order 1,000 or 2,000 books, because even if 400 books sell through the Kickstarter, I'll have 600 extra books then I can bring to conventions, I can sell online, and that's where the real money begins, because I talked to Sean about this when he did his book. It raised, I think, like 25,000 his book raised, but there are so many behind the scenes costs that you actually don't make as much money from the Kickstarter itself as you do when the Kickstarter ends, and you just have a crap ton of inventory that you can sell from that point forward. So let's talk about that. So on my third sketchbook, I made, or the end number that was shown on Kickstarter, this is the public number. So this is the perception of people thinking I literally just made 42 grand. Like that going in my pocket, I'm gonna go buy a boat because I made 42 grand. Even though I'm sure a boat is more expensive than that nowadays. But Kickstarter takes out 5% to Kickstarter. So in this case, it was $2,100. And then, and then actually there's processing fees, which are minimum 3, and it can go up to 5% for credit cards. So this is 2 processing fees. Put down processing. And in this case, it was $2,160. So after that, it is $38,000. So this is more of your actual gross number, because this is the number that you'll receive in the mail, or direct deposit in the mail. They're not sending $38,000 in the mail, unless if you requested a check, but I don't even think they can send that amount. Anyways, this is what you're actually making off your Kickstarter. So even though this is your perception, this is what you have to play with. But from here, see, now this is where it gets kind of like, when I talk to people about making money on Kickstarter, they don't really understand why I don't say Kickstarter is where you actually make your money. So on book 2, it was roughly just to keep numbers clean, it was roughly $12,000. And this was for the actual books. And this is for 2,000 of them. Oops. So 2,000 books. So that takes me down to $26,651. And then from there, The pins and prints that I included, because I did a stretch goal. So these are just stretch goals. I think I separated this specifically to kind of show you. Stretch goals were roughly 2,000. I didn't write the exact amount because I didn't think I'd be doing a presentation on this years later. But I do remember how much the pins cost, and then I can usually estimate the prints based on the quantity. So this was roughly $2,000. So then we're down to 24,000. And then here's the big one that a lot of people know it's a factor but don't know the extent of it being a factor. This is your shipping. Shipping can be a pain in the butt. This includes all of the what I was just showing you, the boxes. Actually, does this include the boxes yet? No, this doesn't even include the boxes yet. This is just purely shipping. So just to ship it to a person where they want it, this was about $3,000, or no, sorry, this was $5,000. And I know a lot of you are thinking, oh my gosh, well, why is it that expensive? Or I'm not going to make any money if I only raise $5,000 on my own book. But you got to remember, for my third Kickstarter, there were 476 backers. So in a lot of these cases, yeah, the shipping is $5,000 because I got to ship to basically 500 people, and that adds up. So if you only have like 80 backers, you're going to have a fraction of these costs, but it still is a lot of money when you add it up. So then this goes into the supplies. So the peanuts, the tape, the boxes, the tissue, everything that goes into shipping. And this was roughly $3,000. And there was something else I was going to add to this. And before the stream, I forgot to write it down, but there was one other factor. Oh, I wish I could remember what that factor was. But essentially, this is your actual net profit. So this may not be as appealing as the first number. So let me move this. Let me make sure you guys can see this all right. So can you see the difference between that number and this number? Because a lot of people think, oh, well, you just have enough, you just struck it rich, you can retire. But in my mind, this is the real number I'm seeing. I only made 16,000. And a lot of that, I'm going to basically be reinvesting into the company. I remember as soon as this ended, I bought a new tablecloth. I bought lights for my booth. I bought a new printer. So I used a lot of that money and reinvested it back into the business. I really do believe in spending a nickel to make a dime. But let's talk about one more thing, and then I'll open this up to Q&A. Let me make sure you guys can still see this. I'll make it a little smaller here. So there's a new tool out that Fem mentioned before, and it's called BackerKit. And the reason BackerKit is so interesting is because this is how you can make some extra money on the side, and it may not be visible on Kickstarter, but it definitely will be visible in your pocket. So BackerKit. And you know what I'm going to put? This is literally Kickstarter. So on BackerKit for this one, I can even show you, because like I said, I don't have a problem being transparent with you guys. So I made over $12,000 on BackerKit for this specific Kickstarter. Or no, this is for my playing cards. Because that one I actually did way better than my third sketchbook, because with my third sketchbook I only had 476 backers, but on my playing cards one I had 1,000, or oops, you can't even see this. I had 1,493 backers. So I had way more people that I could reach out to get backer pledges than I did my third sketchbook. So with my third sketchbook, I made 5,632 gross. So let me add that to this number. And then the total cost of shipping and everything was about 1,407. Oops. So after we minus that, it would be, let's see here, 42 and then 25. So this number can get added to my initial, so plus 16,651. Let's see if I can do this really quick. 6, 7, 8, 20. So this is what I was able to make off my Kickstarter by utilizing BackerKit. So I was able to make an extra 4,200 because of using this platform. Oh, that's what it was. You know what? I remembered there was something this morning. I just remembered what it was. You have to take into account that BackerKit is expensive to use. I think for this project, it was about $800. So this is cost to use it. So in actuality, it wasn't 4,200. It was actually 3,425. And that was the number, not that one. Sorry about that. I knew there was something I forgot. I was like, I feel like there was another big cost, and it was like a hidden one. But then you can add that to your 651, and then we get our 6, 7, carry the 1, 20. No, 19. Wait, that can't be right. Yes, that's right. I'm doubting myself here. Yeah. So this is what I actually made off that Kickstarter. So even though the perception is I just made bank with 42, I'm actually only walking away with 20,000, which is nothing to scoff at. I'm not trying to like shame people that can't make 20,000, but I'm just trying to show you guys that I only actually made about half of what the perceived number of what I made was. And I think that's why Kickstarter can be a little deceiving, because you think you're making, you know, a crap ton of money all in one go, but in reality, it might only be a fraction of what that initial number was. Okay, so I hope this was helpful for you guys. I know this was a lot to digest, and this is not the most fun live stream. It's a lot of numbers and knowing your business. But I hope that this can help you start to see what goes into making a Kickstarter, what will hopefully make it successful, and knowing your numbers and how that can make you have a better net. And the reason why, oh, and I forgot to mention on the last slide, but the books, I found out the cost of my third sketchbook. Which one? No, this one. This cost me $7.82 to make each one. On my fourth sketchbook, the one that I'm making now, I decided to go with a different manufacturer, and she was able to reproduce the same quality. It's the same one that did Viarte's and Sean's Art of Price, and she works out of Chicago. It's Printlore is the company, and she's able to make my fourth book for $5.20. That means I'm able to save $2 on each book. Well, guess what? If you do I'm ordering 2,000 books. That $2 just became a $4,000 savings because I went with a different company. That's crazy. To me, that's actually crazy, because you can just find a little thing where you can save money on, and if you quantify that by, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, you're going to save a lot of money that way. So whenever you're looking for, you know, new products or new boxes, actually, even my boxes, on my last one, I did art on the inside, but my box cost on my last box ended up being $4. I didn't realize, because I spent, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it was like $2,800. Actually, it's probably in my spreadsheet. Oh, did I close it? I closed it. Oh, wait. Here we go. Oh, here, you know what? I'll show you guys one last time really quick as my final example, and then I'll open it up to the Q&A. So for my large boxes, it was actually $4.13, and that's because I did art on the inside and the outside. And with my first box, it was only $2. So my perception of the boxes they were about $2 each, and I was so wrong. And I was $2 off on the cost of the books, and I was $2 off on the cost of the box. So every sale I was making of the box online, there were $4 that I was losing that I thought I was making. And that was because of my own ignorance to my own business. And once I started to really look in the numbers and my cousins started helping with these Excel sheets, I started realizing, oh my gosh, I am bleeding money in areas that I thought I was actually gaining money. So anyways, let me move this back. There we go. So with my new box, the one for my Kickstarter 4, I did the outside of the box because I still like custom boxes. It's kind of fun, but there's no art on the inside. I was able to save $2 per box. So all of a sudden that $4 box just became a $2 per box. And I'm willing to spend $2 per box. If someone's willing to spend $40 to $50 on one of my books before shipping, I can give them a nice box to ship it in. But $4 was way too much. You should never be spending so much on just the shipping supplies that you're eating at your net profit for no real reason. Okay, let me open this up to the comments here. And like I said, if you have any comments on the business side of things, running a Kickstarter, knowing your numbers, how to be better at business, whatever it may be, now is your time to ask. We have about 11 minutes before we hit the 2-hour mark, so I'll try to hit as many as I can, and then we'll close it out. Amy says, Alice also says hi, and she waved at, oh, hello, Alice. I hope you're doing well. Fem says, I think, especially if you are a one-person business, that you should add a time cost to your product for creating the product, but also wrapping, shipping, marketing, since that is the time you lose for working on something else. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of jokes and memes going around on Instagram that I see where it's like the artist is also the graphic designer and the marketer and the what's the person that he has to hear complaints all the time? Not the head of HR, or is it human resources? Maybe it is, but you have to deal with like emails and all that stuff. So if you're gonna become an independent artist, you're also taking on the roles and hats of like 10 different things, and each one you're gonna be kind of sloppy at. I mean, even the art one, the main hat that you're wearing, even that might be a little shaky at times because as artists, sometimes we don't have the best days or weeks, and that can be kind of slumpy. So if the main one's slumping, you better believe the other 9 are also going to kind of be slumped and imbalanced because you can't even get the one that you actually care about right. So it is tough. I don't want to lie to you guys and say like this is easy. This is something I would recommend for every artist to do. It is challenging. But I want you to look up resources. I mean, not only from me, but like all the resources online that you can find. There's so many YouTube videos out there. There's so many Instagram people that are giving and sharing advice that I think is very worthwhile. But more than anything, like do work that is the best work that you can possibly create. Because then all of the other stuff like marketing and finding out business strategies, that's more of like a side hustle where your main focus should still be on making the art. Jonathan says, oh, shipping. Don't lose books in the post from Scotland to Canada, Jonathan. Always track if you can. Shipping overseas is the biggest issue for every artist that I've known in the States. Europe specifically and Australia is so expensive. I think right now, if you want to buy my 3-book collector box, I think it's $60 just for shipping because of the weight, because of all 3 in there. It adds to the girth. This is like a workout tool that can double as a book. But yeah, I definitely plan your shipping accordingly. Do not undersell your shipping. Oh, that's something I should have mentioned in my second Kickstarter. I made the shipping for all international $10, and I made all domestic $5. Well, guess what? All international shipping ended up being $22, and every domestic ended up being $8. So I was actually losing money. I was eating into my profit from that. So when I did the chart, when I showed the shipping was $5,000 on my Cintiq, that $5,000, a lot of that contribution was because I miscalculated the shipping costs overseas. And that's something I don't do anymore, and I charge exactly what is estimated on Squarespace or on Etsy, because if I was still charging $10 for international and this was $60 to actually ship it, I'd be losing $50 of profit every time I was shipping a collector's box to Australia, which that's almost not even worth your time, because then your net profit goes from what was probably around $60 to about $10. Not worth it. You gotta push to not undersell yourself and be in that position. So yes, Jonathan, that's a great point. Tijel says, good Lord, prepping, packaging, sending all those books is once again a huge amount of man hours. Also replying to questions and resending stuff that got damaged or lost. That's so much work. It is. I don't even have too much more to add to that besides it's a lot of work. I take 10 minutes every morning to just answer to Instagram DMs because if I leave it for about 4 or 5 days, there will be roughly, actually I can show you right now. I haven't answered them in about 4 days. Let's see here. Already, let me look at I don't know if you can see that. And Jonathan, you're actually at the top. You mentioned me in your story apparently. There's 90 new requests. I've left this for 5 days and there's 90 requests that I have to respond to because I realize part of running a business is you have to be transparent and you have to be answering DMs or questions about buying something or my package got lost. The worst thing you can do is not answer to people if they're asking about something that they bought and they haven't received it yet. You need to be quick as you can. I have Josh doing all the Etsy, Kickstarter, Patreon messages, and I do all the social media ones. And that's why I'm busy. I think people think that I just draw all day. I would say like 2 to 3 hours of my day are doing behind the scene business stuff, like answering DMs or packaging. We have dailies. I have a daily chart in our other basement where I say other basement like the house is huge, but it's just the way the house was built. There's 3 basements, and then the 2 are connected by like a utility basement that is like our storage. Anyways, in the other basement, we have dailies every day. So I have to wrap 5 card decks, and I have to pack 3. I have to make a sun catcher. I have to gold 5 prints, and then I have to make 5 boxes. And that's something that I specifically have to do every day. And then I take 10 minutes answering any of the big emails that Josh can't do, and I do 10 minutes doing Instagram messages. And yeah, that's not always the fun part of my day, but I do enjoy being around Jake and Josh. So we make it fun. It's kind of like an episode of The Office sometimes because it's so silly. But it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to maintain. So being an artist, if you want to be independent, it's not all rainbows and sunshine, and I'm just drawing in like a forest in my backyard every day. It's a lot of business stuff as well. But that's why I'm trying to prep you guys more for this kind of stuff so that you don't fumble through buying things that you shouldn't have to or overspending on a product that you could get way cheaper on a different website. Like, these are things that I want you to start taking into account now so that you don't make all the mistakes I've made in my 10 years of doing this, where the first 5, I think I could have really used some guidance. I mean, even now I'm still getting guidance from my art friends and learning. So always be a learner. Always be a learner. Fem says, but that backer kit stuff also needs shipping supplies, of course, unless the package is already big enough to put it together. Usually the package is big enough. Like I said, I bought boxes so it can hold a lot. But what I did with the tubes is I made the tubes big enough so that a card deck could easily fit in it as well. So we were able to kind of double down on packaging for the backer kit ones. But it is something to take into account if you are going to use backer kit, is if they add a bunch of stuff to their order, can it all fit in one package? And we've done it many times where we'll have to split it in 2 packages, which is fine. Like, let's say they order 3 books and 4 prints. Well, that's all not going to fit in a box. There's no way a 13 by 17 inch print is going to fit in here, even if you roll it. So we'll split the order into 2. But if they're buying that much, I don't mind making another order or a shipping label for $8 or $20, whatever it is, because they're probably spending about $200, $300 at that point. So I think just to make them feel better, we'll ship it separately, in that way none of it's getting damaged. So that's something to take into account as well. Elena says, sorry, not a question. Just wanted to say you encouraging us to work on what we want to work on helped my art, and I just hit 400 followers on Instagram. A small check mark, but feels good. That's great. I actually do believe in having like little milestone goals along the way. And I think even though it shouldn't be your focus, like having a follower count goals that you're reaching towards, I think is a really good thing because it gives you something to work towards. I don't think it should define what you create, because I think if you're starting to cater your work to gain followers, that's where it becomes problematic. But if you're just saying like, you know what, I'm going to keep doing my work, I'm going to work hard at posting and find like what time works best for me. And if you start to gain followers organically, yeah, I think that's kind of a cool feeling of like, oh, I hit 500 followers. Oh, I hit 1,000. I remember when I hit 10,000, I was just like, it felt great. I was like, man, people actually like what I do. I don't feel like I'm just doing this in my dorm room, you know, that only my friends and family like. Like it was like, oh, strangers are starting to enjoy what I'm doing. And then once I hit, I think 100,000 to me was like this big milestone in my head. And I never thought I would hit much further than that when I was only at like 1,000. But what's cool about the art journey is the further you get, the bigger your goals become. So like right now, I think I'm just under 400,000 on Instagram. My new goal is 500 and eventually 1 million. And those goals seem so ridiculous and far off. But if you start to tell yourself, you know what? No, that's not ridiculous. Like, why not? Why can't I be that person that gets to that point? You know, like what? I think we have to start giving ourselves more permission to take up space in the art world and take space in what we want to create and see in the world that maybe isn't there already. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad for you. Anmiri says, thank you for the stream. It's been extremely helpful and transparent. Well, I hope so. I know there's a lot of rambling on my end, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Fem says, I think it's also good to know your audience. I always see these artists having nice products that I would love support, but for the longest time I could not afford it without an income. Yes. It's something to know of, like, when I go to conventions, I'm no longer selling to children. When I first started off doing cons, I did buttons and like little pins that usually kids would buy it or like their parents would buy it for them. And they were like fan arts. It would be like, you know, Pokemon or Digimon or whatever the pins were. And I remember I sold them for $2 each or 3 for $5. And I remember at that time I was like, oh, I'm making so much money, like, because I just thought it was such a good plan because the pins only costed me like $1 to make, but you don't take into account time, kind of like what Tijal mentioned earlier. I literally cut every single one of those pins out on paper because you print them on a sheet and there's like 16 of them. I cut every single one of those out by hand, those circles, and then you have to put them in a pin maker one at a time. You put in like the pin part, the image, the Mylar plastic cover, and then you pop it, you spin it, you pop it, and that's how you make pins. I have probably popped over 3,000 or 4,000 pins, and at that time I was like, you know, this is the hustle, like glorify the grind, and one day it'll pay off. And then at one point I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm spending so much time popping pins when I should be drawing. But at that time, I thought that was my market. And then once you start to really know yourself or know like what market you're fitting in, I clearly fit in more with like people that love fantasy or Muka kind of style art. And that's the stuff I really liked. So I started to cater more to what I wanted to draw. And then it kind of drew in an audience. And that market I've learned over the years of what it is and like what the statistics of like the age and the type of people that like to buy my work. And it's just something that now I'm very aware of. And you become more aware of it the more you do it. So yeah, I agree. Anthony says, I have to go, but thank you so much for doing this. One of the things I love about being an artist is the sense of community and how we all try to help each other. Yeah, I really do believe artists tend to feel like this band of misfits together. And then it's funny because the older an artist gets, or I shouldn't even say the older, I would say the more successful an artist becomes, whether in their perception or financially, or if they're seen like a leader, I do feel like they lose the sense of feeling like an outsider as much, and they start to feel like they're able to help younger versions of themselves that they can see in other artists. And it's funny because when I go to cons, obviously I used to be like the doe-eyed artist that would go to artists I respect and be like, oh, like I got really nervous talking to them, and like, oh, I've looked up to your art for so many years. Like, you're such an inspiration. I use your work on Pinterest all the time. But what's funny is now it's starting to turn where I'm getting a lot of people coming up to my booth and they're all doe-eyed and like they're nervous to talk to me. I've had for whatever reason, a lot of people cry at my booth. Sometimes I'm like, it's not me, guy. I didn't make her cry. But in a lot of ways, it's been really good because I've had a lot of good heart-to-hearts with people, and they say like either my book stuff was inspiring, and I really do believe it's because we're speaking to a very similar connection that a lot of artists have with one another of like not feeling good enough or not feeling accepted, or in my case, I always felt kind of weird. I knew I was gay pretty young, so that was something that I think I used art as a way to cope with not feeling accepted. And I guess at that time, I really wanted my peers to accept me, so I became, the best artist in the class, and I was never picked on. And I think maybe it was another way for me to sublet what I thought would be me getting bullied, and I was able to like stay clear of bullying when I was younger and even in high school because I was so good at art, and I would like to consider myself a nice person, that I was able to avoid it. But I do think art was like my escape. And I think as we get older, we tend to accept who we are and not look for outside validation as much. But we still love doing the craft of making the art. So I think a lot of older artists or artists that are in a position where they're able to be like a leader, they're able to speak to these younger kids who might not feel like they accept themselves yet, or they don't feel like the people around them listen. And I try to do that a lot, especially with business stuff. It's really hard to make it independently as an artist, and I try my best to give advice to hopefully make it easier, because it is a hurdle. It is a mountain that you're going to have to climb, and hopefully I can give you some camping gear to make the trudge easier. Anyways, but yeah, thank you for coming today. Elena says, yeah, I'm just kind of hoping to eventually get 500 followers. Anything more is just mind-blowing to me. You know what, though? Keep telling yourself that it is doable. I really do believe in the power of thought and manifesting things into reality. It could be the fact that I've experimented with psychedelics, but I really do believe in the power of putting your thoughts and having actions stem from that. Because when you start to believe that you can do, let's say you start to believe you can do 3 finished illustrations a week, if you really believe it in the heart of your hearts that you can do it, the actions that are necessary to make 3 illustrations a week will start to manifest, because you'll start to block out more time for that. You'll start to, schedule out things in your head that you might not even be aware of. Subconsciously, you're doing things. And I really do believe in the power of thought. So never tell yourself that you're not worth it, or you're not going to get a lot of followers, because then I think that becomes your reality. And the more that you tell yourself, without, don't edge on the edge of, or don't lean on the edge of being delusional, because I think, you can definitely have a tendency to do that too if you go that direction. But just being like self-affirmative and go in a positive direction, I think can do wonders for not only your life, but definitely your career. Because I've gotten to the point where I've like thought, I'm never going to move from this house. Me and Josh are very comfortable here. We'll live a pretty Midwestern life. But why not make $1 million a year? It's not even that I want to, but like, why can't I? And then just invest in other artists, or I really like to invest in local vegan companies. It's something that I really try to promote. So I'd love like a vegan grocery store somewhere nearby, and I'd love to be, I don't know if that's called a producer or an investor. I'd love to be able to use my money for good, or something to help the community. And I don't think money is something we should vilify. I think it's very easy to vilify the rich and money, but if you see money as a tool, and if you believe that you can use it for good, that's how I choose to view money. So I think I took out the, making a lot of money as like this evil, tycoon, monopoler, and that's where I see it now. So yeah. But that's just what your comment reminded me of. So sorry, I kind of took that and ran with it. Let's see here. Fem says, you are just too beautiful to witness. We cannot look into the sun for too long without crying. Get out of here. Get out of here. That turtleneck. Get out of here. You guys are funny. Anthony says, okay, I really have to go now, but you genuinely did inspire me to find my personal style, and now I'm on a path where I actually believe I can be a successful artist. Thank you so much. Well, that really does mean a lot to me, especially I'm at this weird stage in my life where I'm actually pretty comfortable with money. And I think like inspiring myself and having goals that keep me motivated, it's harder to do it when you don't feel like you have to. And this is something that I talk to a lot of my friends about that are all also kind of financially stable and kind of stable with like their life, and they don't need art so much to validate who they are or to get acceptance from other people, because once you start, this is a whole nother thing. I could go a whole live stream about how what is our connection to art and how that defines us. But I think a lot of what still motivates me is I see kids or I see younger versions at cons of myself. I'll see like this young girl that came up to me, and I could tell that she was just so passionate. And I remember thinking like, man, I remember when I had that fire and it was burning so bright. But now it's like this fun little Kindle fire that everyone can kind of just like sit around a campfire. But I remember when I was just a blazing inferno, and that's not just a gay joke either. I'm a flamer, but I was so bright that I remember I felt unstoppable, and I was just gonna come into the art world and I was gonna show everyone what I got. And once you start getting validated from other people, you're like, you know what, I don't have to prove myself to other people as much, and all of a sudden that flame like gets smaller and smaller. So then eventually you get to the point where you're like, I just want to connect with people. And maybe I'm just at that point in my life where I'm realizing human connections are the most important thing in this life. So I use art as a way to bridge connections between myself and others. So now I do art as a way for me to connect with other people. And if I can inspire the younger generation and connect with my peers that are my age or within my age range that I want to hang out with and grow old with and share stories with about cons and all that, then that's great. That's kind of my goal right now. And it's been going really well. I'm very thankful for life. I feel like I have a very, very lucky life, and I'm thankful for my parents. And I feel like I'm going on a tangent. I'm getting emotional now, but it's been good, and I think a lot of that does stem from be a good person. And my only mistakes that I think I've made as a person in my life is not knowing how to cut someone out of my life that I could tell wasn't benefiting me, or that we just weren't on a similar wavelength, and there were hurt feelings involved. But that's it. I really do feel like even the worst enemies I have now, the people that I haven't connected with the most in the past few years, we still see each other. And the last time, I'm not going to name names, but one of the people that we definitely are on completely different, polar opposite wavelengths about thought and thinking and how to treat people. And the last time he was here, he actually helped me garden, and he bought me my favorite cookie. It was like I enjoyed his company. So I'm realizing, if we stop looking at other people as how different they are from us and like not accepting them for that, but just kind of accepting that, yeah, they're different and we might not get along and we have differences of opinion, but I can still be around them and get to know them as a human. I think there's a lot of growth there. And I think art, once again, kind of bringing it back to this, art is one of those ways where you can kind of see within a person and how they're feeling and who they are. And rather than being so judgmental, you can start to find some empathy. But like I said, this is a whole nother talk. I'm not even gonna talk about one of those comments. Felix says, I feel the same way. You gave me the confidence to pursue art seriously again soon after I sort of gave up on it when I was 20-ish. Oh, Felix, I mean, that's great to hear, because I think you're awesome. I think you'll be one of those artists that will just do really well. So please don't give up. I really do believe in you, and I'm glad that you're starting to see it for yourself too. Sigil says, what about taxes? Woo! When you get $20,000 from Kickstarter, doesn't the government take a chunk out of that? Yeah. Taxes are interesting because you can write off a lot. So like all of the expenses I showed you on that chart that took me from $42,000 to $20,000, that $22,000 you're able to write off. Or at least in America, you're able to write that off. And then remember how I said I reinvested a lot of that 20 grand back into the business? So I bought a printer, I bought a lot of con stuff, I bought a crap ton of paper and a new desk, a new filing cabinet. all of that can also be written off. So it's maybe this is just in America, but there's a thing where in December, let's say you have about 30 extra grand, or even if it's smaller, let's say you have like 5 extra grand. If you don't want to pay taxes on that 5,000, you literally buy $5,000 worth of inventory or supplies or whatever it may be. That way you can write it all off, and that way what you have to pay on taxes becomes zero. I'm not telling you to do fraud. I think there's a lot of artists I know. I'm definitely not going to name names that like work the tax system. I'm not one of those. I play it very safe because I'm so worried about my house being taken from me. And if that happened, I would be devastated because I love this house so much and the memories that I have with it and are still creating to this day. So yeah, but I know other countries handle taxes differently. Okay, last question, and then we'll end it off here. Fem says, so now you just have all the tools to make a blazing fire yourself when you want to, but you mostly choose to use it to light some candles and make it a nice evening with people in your life. That is the cutest metaphor I have heard in a while. I'm literally copy and pasting that. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not gonna get emotional. I'm not one to cry really, except if I watch a movie. For some reason, movies can still get me pretty easily, but that's kind of how I see it now, because I'm using art as a way to connect with people. Like I have a lot of friends like Victor in California or Miles out overseas, and I'm able to connect with these people that I don't know on a day-to-day basis, but I'm able to connect to them because I think our souls are on like similar wavelengths, and I would have never met a lot of these people if I didn't use art to bridge the gap. And now, like a lot of the friends that I've made over the years, they come to my house a few times a year, and we have big hangouts, we have big parties, and I love just celebrating life with people. And it's not just like how can we make more money, and that's all we think about time to time. The older I get, the less I talk about money with people, because I realize that's a very like 20s mentality to have. Like you're up and up and up and up, and that's all you want to do. And I see a lot of the people in the NFT community, that's kind of the whole direction and conversation. It's just kind of flexing on people how much money you're making. But I think that's why when this whole situation came out like 2 months ago with these digital NFT stuff, I was already in a pretty good place in my mind. Like I've never felt better in my life. And to me, I don't need to be putting more work into making money. I'm already doing well enough in money. I want to put work into having a really nice garden in my backyard. I want to work on having a really nice pumpkin patch in my front yard that will grow pumpkins by the time Halloween's here, and I can have it for the trick-or-treaters when they come by, and I can scare them in my little costume. I'm more focused on life events, but it's because I was able to put a lot of time and dedication into art in like 10 years span, which I think you do need a span of like dedication to your art so that you can kind of ride off that for the rest of your life. And that's kind of what I'm doing. But then don't forget, people. And, this is really the goal. Hopefully, I mean, that's where I'm at right now. Who knows? Maybe in like 2-3 years, I'll have a different view of life. But as of right now, I really do believe it's in connections and, making fun experiences that you can share with other people. So that's going to be my ending note. I'm going on a way different tangent than what this stream was all about. So instead, I'll just say thank you guys for coming to this live stream. We have a new one on this upcoming Monday. It's literally the launch of my 4th Kickstarter, my 4th art book. And that will be at 11 a.m. Central Time, so it'll be an hour earlier because I'm going to show you what it takes to launch an actual Kickstarter live, and then me and Josh will be popping champagne. We'll have an hour of just having fun with you guys, and yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll just be one of those fun streams, but I'll definitely show you. I have a whole, where is it? I have a marketing schedule, so you can see my actual live launch. Where is it? Right here. So I have to do certain things in order. I'm a very methodical person on like the business side of things, so I can show you guys what that looks like. Okay, I'm done talking. I'm almost out of breath. Oh, see, now I got the hiccups. All right, thank you so much everyone for coming, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you on Monday. And yeah, just remember I have my launch on Monday if you want to get my new art book. And thank you all for the great questions. Those were great. Okay, I'll go now. Okay, bye everyone. Bye. I love you guys so much. Thank you. Bye.